समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
America's envoy to India, Sergio Gore, in Delhi, described the relationship between Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi as real, and then said that real friends can sometimes disagree, but they eventually resolve their differences. Gore's comments were seen to be an attempt to inject some optimism in the battered relationship between Delhi and Washington. But is it too little, too late? The trade deal between the two countries continues to be elusive. And a high-ranking official in the Trump administration just recently revealed that it all seems to boil down to a bruised ego. Howard Lutnick said that if only Modi had picked up the phone and called Donald Trump, things may have been very different. To talk about the relations between India and the United States of America, but also the state of play on the global stage, is one of the world's leading public intellectuals. He's a columnist, an author, a television host, and of course also of Indian origin himself. The guru, as it were, of geopolitics, Fareed Zakaria, joins us from the United States today. Thank you so much, Fareed, for your time. Appreciate it. Let me ask you, you once called the Trump administration's imposition of tariffs on India, the highest in the world, one of the biggest strategic blunders made by the Trump administration. Do you believe that there is any realization, even on background in the Trump administration, that this has been a colossal mistake? Or do the contradictions abound? For example, Howard Lutnick just this week saying, hey, why didn't Modi call Trump? Showing a complete failure to understand how Indians actually think and feel about what's happened.
Yeah, I think right now the Trump administration is still in a completely kind of, monarchic phase where the king does nothing wrong, can never do anything wrong, is perfect, and the emperor is always fully clothed. So there is nobody who will talk in any way about how there could be any mishandling, any miscommunication on their part. It's always the mistake is on the other side. And I think that unfortunately, what this means is there's going to be more of these kinds of things. But one thing that Howard Lutnick did convey, which I think is very accurate, is the degree to which this has become a kind of royal court in the United States, where everything depends on Trump's final approval. It has to go to him because he would not allow, what would normally be the way a democracy would function, which is cabinet ministers or secretaries of state or secretaries of commerce would make these decisions, tee it up to him for final approval. No, he wants to personally broker the deal and view it as, in a sense, a case where he personally negotiated the final stages. He arm wrestled and got these final commitments. So that whole highly narcissistic, kind of monarchical mindset is very true. And it is true that Trump was expecting a call from Modi where Trump could personally confer this reduced rate on to Modi. That's where we are in the United States right now.
Fareed, Sergio Gore, who's just taking over as America's envoy to India, calls the relationship, the friendship between Trump and Modi real. There was a time when Modi was criticized by some quarters at home for investing too much personally in Trump. What is your read? Do you still believe that at a personal level, the two leaders can repair this? Or do you believe that the personal injury, Trump's ego clearly, but perhaps even for Prime Minister Modi, the personal injury is now so deep that it's going to take a lot more than a couple of phone calls between the two leaders to get this back on track?
I think it can be repaired. I think Modi has the capacity to do it. India is important enough. But there is one big issue. Modi will have to make the ask. Modi will have to be the kind of prime mover in this. One thing Donald Trump is actually very shrewd about and intelligent about is he understands leverage. He understands when he has it and when he doesn't. You notice when he went up against China and the Chinese retaliated with the rare earth ban, he understood China has incredible power on this, not just in rare earths, in the entire supply chain of critical minerals, pharmaceuticals and such. He backed off. He's backed off completely on China. He knows that in the case of India, he has leverage. India needs this deal more than he needs it. And India is a much weaker economy than China. So don't expect that Trump will make some far-seeing strategic gesture because he sees that India down the road is potentially going to be, but that's not how Trump operates. Today, he has power and he's going to use it. So it requires something difficult for Prime Minister Modi, which is that he would have to do the asking.
Mm-hmm. And, I have more to ask about that. But since you mentioned China and you also said that India remains important to the United States of America, there is sort of a growing perception in sections of Indian, I would say, policymakers that perhaps Trump is either thinking of a G2 or a G3 universe, one in which the United States, China, and Russia are the only three players that count. And India's typical strategic relevance as a countervailing force to the rise of China may no longer apply. There are also Americans on the left of the spectrum, folks like Jeffrey Sachs, who argued that India should actually walk out of the Quad. Why be in an alliance, against China when Trump may cut a deal with China? Do you think Trump wants to cut a deal with China?
Oh, Trump absolutely wants to cut a deal with China. And your broader point about the kind of tripolar world he sees is very much the way he looks at the world. He is a kind of very old-fashioned realist who thinks that this entire liberal international order, rules-based order, has been a scam because America has had to pay for it. I completely disagree with him. It's as the rest of the world can easily see, America has done pretty darn well from this order, at which it is the center. But that is not how Trump sees it. Trump, I think, very much views it because the fundamental thing to understand about Trump is he thinks only in terms of transactions, never in terms of relationships, never in terms of long-term value. He just wants to squeeze you on this particular deal. And so that is the way Trump looks at it. It is still a bad idea for India to try to do what Jeff Sachs is suggesting. I mean, honestly, it's silly. India has much more in common with the US. Trump is not going to be around forever. These are deep strategic bonds, deep, frankly, political, economic, sociological, ideological bonds that the two societies have, the two governments have built over 25, 30 years. That is going to remain. And the reality, the geopolitical reality of a China that is competitive and threatening to both the United States and India, and therefore a shared threat, is very real. And that's not going to go away. As Prime Minister Modi well knows, you can try to make nice with China. That doesn't mean they will reciprocate. People forget Modi was very nice to China. There were a lot of outreaches to China in the early Modi years, and in response, they got an attack in the Himalayas. So I think the Indian strategic establishment and Modi in particular, they understand that, and what they will do is my guess is there will be a greater patience in dealing with the United States. Whether there is a greater willingness to court the United States, that I don't know. That, to be honest, there are two big egos involved here, not just Donald Trump. And so that would require Modi to do things that he's also not very comfortable with. But there will be a strong relationship between the US and India 10 years from now, I guarantee it.
I hope your optimism is accurate, but when it comes to egos, the Indians here would argue that this began with Trump feeling miffed and peeved that India did not give him credit for what he claims is his role in bringing to a halt the military conflict between India and Pakistan, which India calls Operation Sindoor. And India has said that while the Americans may have played the role of a messenger, they played no mediatory role. Also, Trump undermined the sovereignty of India by making that announcement of the halt in hostilities before India could. So I think when you say there are two egos, India would say, well, there's one bruised ego and the other side has pride, and pride is not the same as an ego. What would you say?
I would say anyone who would make a fair analysis of Prime Minister Modi would say that there are big egos on both sides as a general proposition. And I think, if you watch, for example, the way Keir Starmer handles Trump, I think it would be fair to say that Prime Minister Modi is unlikely to be willing to handle him in quite the same way.
Starmer is embarrassing. I'm sorry, I'm cutting you short there, but to watch,
I know you.
It's
I know, but
it's embarrassing to watch Keir Starmer.
But he gets what he wants, right? I mean, is this about you or is it about the country? I think what Keir Starmer would say is, I got Britain the first deal, the lowest tariffs. I got him to agree to a special partnership on AI. Like, these are not insignificant things. Again, you can, we've all, you and I are old enough to remember when India stood on pride and dignity and gave grand speeches at the UN. It didn't get it very much. So there's an issue of how much you're willing to swallow if you want to deliver for your country. Look, I think what Trump is asking for on Sindoor is factually wrong, unreasonable. I think my feelings about Trump. On the other hand, if I were in the position of an Indian policymaker at the time, I think there was a way to compliment the United States and thank President Trump personally for his involvement in a way that would have been harmless. If you go back to Vajpayee, this happened a couple of times, and not that the Americans ever asked for it at the time, but I think the press asked Vajpayee once. And he said, we are very grateful to the United States for being willing to use their good offices to facilitate some of these conversations or whatever I mean, after all, this is what diplomacy exists for. You come up with some phrase that allows each side to feel, the Americans and the Indians, that their dignity has been retained. But given that Trump made this a point of pride for him, and we know that he cares about this, we know he sits around, he carries this list of 8 conflicts that he claims to have ended, half of which have not even ended, if you look at the ones in Africa. But if you're trying to get something out of him, why not find a way to say, thank you, America, we appreciate your efforts. You don't need to, what is the gain in saying, but by the way, you did absolutely nothing, things like that. It seems to me that there's an opportunity lost there in standing so much on pride. But remember, as I said, I think what Trump was asking for was totally unreasonable. My question is, if you're an Indian policy, if you're Modi or Modi's the PMO at that point, how do you respond to an unreasonable offer? Given that you want something out of them, why not find a way?
Mm-hmm. But what now? There's one added problem that we haven't spoken about, and that is the cozying up of Pakistan to Trump. Trump calls Asim Munir his favorite field marshal. There's a whole cryptocurrency business relationship reported between members of Trump's family and institutions in Pakistan. There could be a kind of transactional need for Pakistan if America makes an intervention in Iran, et cetera, et cetera. So there is also the skepticism in Delhi that this is a little bit back to the future. There's a deja vu-ish sort of feeling here. What's actually going on between Washington and Islamabad? What do you make of it?
It's very worrying, honestly, because it does, again, have the feeling of this very monarchical situation where, Trump just personally has been charmed by the Pakistanis for the reasons you described. I think Munir is he's very talented at, cozying up and seducing and making these asks that we're talking about. He has certainly been more than willing to kind of flatter Trump in various ways, nominating him for the Nobel Prize and such. Look, it again won't change the reality that one thing the Indians can do is build stronger ties with the Pentagon, build stronger ties with the State Department, build so that underneath the surface element, you have very strong ties and relationships. I suspect that the Pakistani one will prove to be more of a flash in the pan because, first of all, on the crypto side, like everything Pakistan does, it's not going to be particularly big or grand or impressive. I mean, what does Pakistan have in the way of crypto? I really don't see. I'd be very surprised if this turns into some kind of a gold mine. There are very few gold mines in Pakistan, and they are real gold. They're not big in the knowledge industry and the high tech and things like that. And strategically, there is a reality that Pakistan has increasingly become a client state of China. And that piece of it, the Pentagon knows, and that they will feel very uncomfortable with cozying up too much to a regime that has essentially become an arm of Beijing. So I'm again, you can see, Barkha, I'm trying to look at the upside here, look at the positive. But I do think that one can get too rattled by some of these things, unsettling as they are.
Let me ask you this. You've spoken about how Delhi could have been more creative at the time of Operation Sindoor, massaged Trump's ego just a little bit. Even in the context of the trade deal, clearly Trump's expecting that call from Prime Minister Modi. If you were sort of, able to read the sentiment right now on both sides, what is the best path that you see out of this sort of impasse that both countries find themselves in?
If I were in Prime Minister Modi's position, I would reach out. I would, find a way to make a deal, and I would, invite Trump for a grand state dinner at Rashtrapati Bhavan, line up 1,000 elephants, get the Maharajas of Baroda and Jaipur to come, get Mukesh Ambani and Adani to come. Trump likes that. And by the way, the Indians know how to do this, better than anyone else. I mean, if you, between the Maharajas and the Ambanis, I think you could put on a pretty grand affair that even Trump would be dazzled by. And what it would get is, India would be more tightly connected to the fastest growing, largest economy in the world that is at the frontiers of technology. India would be able to get the best defense equipment in the world. I mean, look at what the Americans were able to do in Venezuela. There's no other country that has that capacity. So I think there's a big upside. And I think, accepting that for whatever reason, this extraordinary country is currently ruled by this man, and figuring out a way to make it work. That's, to my mind, what is in the national interests of India. And if it means, having to contort yourself a little bit in ways that you would normally not contort yourself, so be it. But as I said, Trump does get leverage. And he knows that he has, you can see him with almost every relationship. But the good side of that is if you do meet him on his terms, which are personal, he changes. Look at the Swiss, right? Switzerland had bizarrely 38.9% tariffs or something like that. The president of Switzerland goes with a delegation. The CEO of Rolex sends him a special watch. He literally is given a gold bar, for ceremonial purposes. And within 10 days, the tariffs go down from 39 to 15 to our European Union average. That is literally the only thing that changed. One Oval Office meeting where they flattered Trump.
Yeah. Well, the government here said that Modi and Trump have spoken 8 times, but I think what you're saying is something a little different. You're saying manage Trump's ego, just a little bit, be smart and manage Trump's ego.
Exactly. It's not how many times they talk. It's what is Modi saying in those conversations, right? That's the point. What Trump wants to hear, Watch, if you will, the president of Kazakhstan, who met with Trump today or yesterday, and in his opening remarks, he basically all but compares Trump to to Jesus Christ. I mean, it's the most extraordinary act of flattery I have ever seen a sitting head of state do. And Kazakhstan is a very rich country. It's got huge oil and natural gas reserves, and yet the guy knew if he was going to get something out of Trump, that was the modus operandi. And Trump sits there nodding, sagely taking it in as though, it's like, yes, indeed, I am so great. That's the world we're in.
That is the world we're in. But just a last point on this before we move on to some other stuff. There are domestic political costs if Modi were to even do this, which, as you have pointed out, would be quite uncomfortable for him as a public persona. Rahul Gandhi has been baiting Prime Minister Modi on this non-stop, has accused him of being already far too subservient, has already accused him of not standing up. And what you're suggesting is basically handle Trump with kid gloves. So I'm just saying Modi doesn't have a lot of great options right now in how to handle this in public, at least.
Look, you put it exactly right, and your reading of the situation is exactly right. And in fact, I think that there is also some anxiety on the BJP side and the RSS side. People often forget the BJP and the RSS in its origins are very xenophobic. They're very anti-foreigner. They have always liked protectionism and tariffs in the Indian context for a different reason, not because they were socialists, but because they want to keep out foreign influence, foreign culture, foreign goods, that may kind of import Western liberalism in all its dangerous forms. So there's that element of the BJP that Modi also has to be careful if he seems too pro-American. But what I would say is this: Modi has more room to maneuver than pretty much any Indian prime minister I can think of since Indira Gandhi. He's got, a very comfortable majority in the Lok Sabha. He totally dominates the Rajya Sabha. State legislatures are, he has a larger representation there. Again, he is the dominant political figure in India in 4 decades. If he can't use his political capital to do something important for the country that's of strategic value, what difference does it make? And if Rajiv Gandhi is going to make a comeback, the Congress is going to make a comeback, it's not going to be on a foreign policy issue, as you know. These are clever things where, it looks good in the Lok Sabha debates and it looks good on Twitter, but Aam Aadmi is not going to vote on this basis.
Fair enough. Let's zoom out a bit and have you give us a sense of what you think Trump is up to vis-a-vis Greenland, vis-a-vis Iran, where you think he might head with intervention next. I've been following, of course, your writings and your shows on this, and you most recently said a selfish America is a lonely America. You think that Trump is now hurtling down the path of a certain kind of neo-imperialism that in the end is going to bite the Americans in the back. But what is your read? What is going to happen next? Where is his attention now?
So much of what Trump does is idiosyncratic and emotional and opportunistic that it's hard to come up with a grand theory behind it. So there are elements of this tripolar world that he seems to like, being able to do deals with Putin and Xi and settle things. But then he also enjoys meddling. He loves the idea of being, part of it is he's like a television producer. He's always wanting to change the story. So now the story is that the Iranian people he's going to be their savior, right? What is clear is that he likes the initial drama of it and then kind of gets bored with the follow-up. So what is likely to happen? Yes. So what is likely to happen in Venezuela is far from a regime change that totally transforms the place. He basically took Maduro. He's made a deal with the rest of the regime, as far as we can tell. They will basically stay intact. So they will be as repressive. They will be as authoritarian as they have been. They will probably make some concessions to American oil companies, which, by the way, they had been happy to do all along because they need oil investment. And the American companies had been unwilling to go because of their past behavior and such. So it's easy to imagine some deal that comes out of that. So effectively, what you get is a few small changes, and life goes on. And yet Trump keeps saying it was a great victory for me. In Iran, it's there's more consequential, because I think that the U.S. could do something very significant. But if it gets very messy, this is when my prediction is Trump withdraws. Why Trump will not follow through. Let's say in Iran, he does a few strikes. And let's say in Iran, things implode, which is much more likely than anything else. The power vacuum, chaos, the military and the Revolutionary Guard remain the people with the guns. The clerical establishment maybe falls. Who's going to, in that situation, some charismatic military figure is likely to become the leader. Trump is going to probably try to do a deal. In fact, he's already signaled that if the Iranians want to do a nuclear deal, he'd be happy. Great episode for the next show. You see what I mean? It's like, if the story is dramatic, he is at the center of it. That's what's important to him. So it's hard in that circumstance to say, oh, I get his worldview. He goes to Saudi Arabia and says to the region, to the Middle East, I do not believe in interfering in your domestic politics. What is he doing right now in Iran, but interfering in the domestic politics of Iran, which, by the way, I think the Iranian people deserve help. But all I'm pointing out is hard to see where the consistent strategy or ideology is there. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. Now, one thing we do know Trump really strongly believes, as I said, is the liberal international order, the European alliances. This has all cost America too much. So that is what he is viscerally opposed to and has always been opposed to. And that is unfortunately where the biggest price I think that we'll pay for Trump will come, which is the unraveling or the weakening of this very strong alliance of democracies that has kept the world stable and open for really 7 decades. That's the part that is already weakening, and it could unravel.
I have to ask you in the end, on a somewhat personal note, as an Indian American, what is it really like today to be in Trump's America? And I understand that, on the coast, on the East Coast, or, as part of what Trump might call the DC elite, you may not feel something personally. But these horrific videos coming out of Minneapolis, for example, the entire sort of overarching power to ICE agents, the fact that fewer students from India are now looking at the United States as an option, the whole sort of fight over visas and H-1B visas and green cards, there's a sense that there's quite a real possibility of the kind of racism that Indian migrants last probably experienced in the 1970s. So I just want to ask you, does it feel real, or is it more exaggerated on social media?
It does feel real. Not to me personally. You're exactly right. I live in fortunate circumstances, both geographically, but also the kinds of people I associate with. It obviously doesn't come up, but broader culturally, what you see on television, what you see in social media, and these are real things. They're not just things. Not just. I don't mean comments on Twitter. I mean, there's a temple being built in a suburb, and all of a sudden there's a huge opposition to it, because why the hell do we have these crazy Indians coming in with their weird religion? Why, things like that, which you had never seen before. In fact, you had seen to a large extent a kind of lovely acceptance of the idea of this is diversity, this enriches us. I feel like the mood in general is so different from the mood when I came to America. When I came to America, there was people didn't know much about a place like India, but they were very interested and curious, and they loved the fact that you liked America and wanted to live there. There was a deep sense that immigration was strengthening the country. Ronald Reagan, the most conservative Republican figure really of the last 40 years pre-Trump, he was overtly pro-immigrant. In fact, you could argue he was more pro-immigrant than the Democrats. He was the one who did the big amnesty of illegal immigrants. That was the America I sort of entered. And now, it's one where there's a lot of nasty talk about immigrants. There's a lot of demeaning of but also in particular, a real kind of celebration of the idea that there is some original pre-immigrant culture in the United States that should be celebrated, that should be venerated. And a lot of it will be, talks about explicitly about being white or being Christian. And these were things you never saw. So there is I've talked about this in my last book. We're living in an age of backlash. And part of that backlash is a kind of cultural nostalgia for a pre-multicultural politics, a pre-multicultural society. And that, I think, is going to be with us for the foreseeable future, not just in the United States, but in the Western world in general.
Well, scary times and uncertain times, Fareed, but I know you've got a whole bunch of things to do, so we're going to let you go now. It's always a pleasure. Thank you, and hope to see you in our neck of the woods soon. Thank you, Fareed. Take care.
Always a pleasure, Barkha. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.